Sul Sul, hello, and Labas. Thank you for joining me on this build video of a medieval home for Catalina and Huxley Plowman, characters in my Ultimate Decades series. So what I'm doing here is I'm building a little shop because Huxley has a great love for baking and he is now released from the family, which means he's free to go on and live a happy life. So this is going to be his storefront, this front building, close to the street where people can get to it more easily. And I am trying to make sure that the roof doesn't look too perfect or too modern because this would have been crafted by hand. Now the front of the shop is open because the shop will have an oven in it, and I feel like that would produce enough heat for the people working, and this way passerby might be more enticed to come in and buy something from the bakery. Also, I've used a really dark wood for the spandrels and pillars because I feel like with all of the ovens running, with all of the heat being produced, the soot maybe coming out, the wood would darken over time as it was exposed to more and more stuff. This is an oven from Medieval Sims Tailor and Carpenter. It's part of a 4-oven set that works with the Ye Olde Cookbook mod by Little Bo Bub if you use that. And I feel like it's big enough to handle most of the work needs that a running bakery would have. So I thought it was a good fit for this one. Also, these horse ranch counters are a really great fit for medieval or decades builds just because they look more natural, like somebody could have crafted them by hand if you ignore the handles on the cabinets at the bottom. Bakeries at this time were often built outside of cities to lower the risk of fire spreading because that was a massive concern in medieval times given the flammable nature of all the building materials people used, including thatched roofs like this building has, but the town is pretty full, so they're going to just be living here instead. Now I'm putting in a display cabinet from Get to Work, even though it's not really time period appropriate, because while bakeries often made a lot of their income from doing the baking for other people, what would happen in the medieval period was kind of strange. People would make their own dough, but it was illegal for them to bake it for themselves at home. So what they would do is they would take it to a baker who would bake it for them, partly because of the risk of fire, but also so that people in the lordly status would be able to charge them taxes for it. And they would then pay the baker to bake their bread for them, then go back and get it once it had been baked. But I don't have any bakeries in my town, so I decided that they were also going to sell baked goods, just in case I would like them to have them available. Here I'm looking for some debug options to put in the display case, but I couldn't find any, so instead I'm just going to have Huxley end up making them and put them for sale, which I think is kind of sweet. Then it's all stuff that he's made. And he's close with the main family in my Decade series, so that'll be nice for them to go around and, hang out with him. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is a good fence that will match the vibe of this building, but also be time period appropriate. Because while the shopfront is open to the public, Huxley and Catalina will probably want to keep their home fenced in order to keep their livestock animals contained. Pretty much all classes of people in this time period would have had livestock, often sheep, chickens, and at least one cow. And these were essential animals to a peasant lifestyle for the goods that they produced, which might be some of the only food sources available to them in the winter time. And it took me a minute to figure out the floor plan. I wanted to do something more interesting with the shape of their home, but then I remembered roofing and gave up on the idea in favor of a more generic shape that would be easier to work with. It's also a quite small plot of land, so I tried to put down the bigger items that I knew that they would need, like the cow shed or the chicken home first, so that I could see how much space we would have to work around that. Once I had put those down, since they were kind of important, especially to a bakery, that's when I was able to start outlining their actual home, which is going to be a really small home actually, and start putting placeholder furniture in so that I could see and make sure that everything would fit together. Which, spoiler alert, I forget to put a crib in, so like a infant crib, not a baby crib. So if you play with this home, you'll have to move some things around to make sure that there's an infant crib because If not, your infants don't have anywhere to sleep. I don't imagine that most peasant homes had tons of stuff hanging around for fun or decoration. I imagine that some peasant homes had, well, all peasant homes would have had some decoration because people would have made things, they would have traded things. Of course, anytime a lot of people will buy stuff that they think is pretty or attractive. So I imagine that they would have some decorations, but none that are too crazy. And so it's the same with these guys. They don't have anything too crazy. They mostly just have functional items that serve a purpose for them to be comfortable living there. A lot of peasant homes had a mud or clay floor, and they would put straw over the top of it that they would sometimes change and sometimes not. So I was just putting down some layers of straw and adding a few windows. Even though most peasant homes really didn't have that many windows, I can't stand that, so I went ahead and gave them some. Just a few. It's probably still more than they would have had, but it's still nice to have some windows and occasionally be able to look outside. And I know that Journey to Batu is one of the most divisive packs in the whole game, but those walls, those like gross looking sort of like clay walls, are super useful for medieval builds because it really looks like something that people might have smeared on their walls at the time. Ooh, this is a really beautiful sink from Lili's Palace. If you don't know Lili's Palace, they create the most beautiful little sets, oftentimes like kind of with a historical focus or historical look, and inspired from Eastern Europe a lot of the time, specifically from Hungary. So they are beautiful pieces, and that sink is no exception. And then yeah, just sort of like doing some finishing touches where we put some roofs on that look a little bit more natural, hopefully for the time period. All of them thatched, of course, which the snow doesn't help us to see their true colors. And a few last finishing touches in terms of the basic of the build before fixing the fence and making sure it's something that really matched instead of, something that didn't really fit. Next up, of course, every bakery needs to have its own gardening plot. Well, all medieval homes really need to because people were dependent on themselves a lot of the time for the food that they consumed. And so I'm just putting down some garden plots so that I can put some debug plants that will be helpful based off of the in-game recipes for baked goods like carrots and herbs and stuff like that, things that they need in the game based off of the game's recipes for baking. It might not necessarily be time period appropriate or real since choco berries aren't exactly real, but it is something that's useful for them. And again, since they're not in my main family, they can sort of have some more freedom than the rest of my Sims do. So yeah, that's about it. We just sort of like set some gardening things in, had them get out there and start planting them, and Huxley went ahead and baked some goods, and that was about it. Their home was done and they were ready to go on and live a great medieval life of being bakers. I hope that you've enjoyed this speed build, and look out for the next medieval build video coming up for a new addition to the Ultimate Decades Challenge in my playthrough. Bye bye everyone!